Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, if there is one area where public opinion is united, it is an outrage over crime, especially after a series of restaurant and bar robberies. On matters of politics, however, opinions are divided in many ways, as poll results revealed this week. We'll be looking tonight at crime and elections, as well as the latest on Steve Scalise looking for a job upgrade. And the number for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Jeremy Alford, publisher, LaPolitics.com. Jonathan Bullington, reporter, NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune. And Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate. It is election time, Stephanie, and we're going to go first to you. The Advocate, along with WWL-TV, released a poll. We've been sort of revealing them through the course of the week.
Exactly.
WWL certainly has. Let's talk about the governor and the poll results for the governor's race.
A lot of different interesting tidbits. We interviewed 800 people at the end of September. First, the four-way major candidate horse race. We had David Vitter and John Bel Edwards tied for first, so that would be for the two runoff spots. Scott Angel and Jay Darden kind of trailing about 10 points behind them, and obviously there's a margin of error. One of the interesting results is when we did kind of hypothetical runoff matchups, David Vitter, who has long been considered the front runner, he loses to each of his potential opponents.
And that is a surprise.
It's a little bit of a surprise. Yeah. I don't know whether it will hold. You know, certainly if he gets into a runoff with John Bel Edwards, the Democrat, I think partisan voting will probably reemerge. I do think he has to worry if he does end up in a runoff with either of the other Republicans, because they would be eligible to get a lot of the Democratic votes, I think, against him.
And just on the screen, you saw the list of all of the people running for governor. It's more than just those four that we were talking about right now.
Those are the kind of major candidates that most people have determined.
So this is the Claris poll,
yes,
right, conducted by Ron Fauché.
Correct.
Now, there are other polls that are being conducted, too. I mean, are we seeing these kind of results in all of the polling that's being done right now?
What were the dates on this poll?
September 20th to the 23rd, I believe.
Right. So there have been polls circulating this week, and everyone's starting to do overnight tracking. So now we're talking about shifts and changes, you know, from day to day, within a few days. And so the polls that have come out this week, one from Triumph Campaigns and another from Signal Polling, that was actually paid for by a group of businessmen who were once with Vern Kennedy, and they've broken off and now they're doing their own thing. And some overnights that I've seen all show similar trends. One of those being that Jay Darden has moved ahead of Scott Angel. We can attribute that to the attacks from David Vitter and his allied super PAC are resonating more against Angel. Darden has finally gone up on TV. He has a new ad out with just a precious little girl, and they're talking about collecting unpaid child support. In the Attorney General's race, we're seeing Jeff Landry moving closer and closer to Buddy Caldwell, the incumbent, within 1 to 3 points, depending on which poll you're looking at. In the Attorney General's race, we're seeing John Young moving ahead of Billy Nungesser, Lieutenant Governor, Lieutenant Governor, for that coveted runoff spots against Mayor Kip Holden. It's all within the margin of error, all of these moves. Jay Darden ahead of Scott Angel, John Young ahead of Billy Nungesser.
But this is where you start to pick up whether there's momentum or not.
Yeah, and so we're going to see. I think we're going to see changes over the next 3 weeks.
It's interesting. You mentioned the attack ads. I mean, Vitter is also attacking Jay Darden, so maybe his attacks on Scott Angel are landing more. He has one ad that's playing in heavy circulation, linking him to Barack Obama, which is kind of a standard tactic in the state for Republicans.
And something really interesting in that governor's race is the votes that are falling off of Angel, Darden, and Vitter are going partly to John Bell, but also to undecided. We're seeing your poll has undecided at 18. I saw undecided this week at 21.5.
Wow. Okay.
And usually the undecided gets smaller the closer you move. Yeah. And at the end of the day, those people usually don't vote. Pollsters say maybe a third will show up, maybe.
Right. And it does make sense. If you're a Republican, you have some good choices here. So maybe people haven't decided.
Errol?
So if you're David Vitter, your strategy, obviously, of course, is to try to do everything you can to get to run off against John Bel Edwards, and then you'd have a walk. Is there a possibility? Is there a strategy by which Angel and Darden can get past John Bel Edwards and be the one to be in the runoff against Vitter?
I don't think so.
I think early on there was an idea that maybe one of them could try to be the de facto Democrat and really pull Democrats off of John Bel Edwards with this idea that the only way you beat David Vitter is with another Republican. that's a very hard thing to pull off, and really nothing seems to have materialized, and it's very late.
Yeah.
And they are, pulling from the same pot here too, which one of them might be able to do.
Now all
it,
of a sudden it seems like John Bell has the momentum.
Yeah.
But the runoff's a completely different picture.
And no one's attacking John Bell. So
there's a debate
they
at
all want to run against him.
WDSU Thursday night, and I think that was kind of a microcosm of the race that we could see. We saw John Bell Edwards on stage defending Planned Parenthood, gay marriage licenses, saying that I support the president, that he was a delegate to. Now, he had qualifiers to everything because he has these conservative stances. He's 100% pro-life, but I could see these statements already being used in negative attack ads against John Bell Edwards. And then you saw David Vitter to the right of the field talking about his national right for life endorsement. And so, I hate to compare them, but I can't help but think of the Senate race last year where we had two sides of the ideological spectrum, although I think John Bell Edwards is closer to David Vitter than Landrieu was to Cassidy.
Medicinal marijuana, Vitter was the only one against that. So that's another
Okay, let's
issue.
talk debate.
Okay.
You refer to it, the debate on WDSU Thursday. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Is there something to follow up?
what Gracie was talking about, what I really enjoyed hearing was a conversation. It wasn't really a conversation, but some talk about mass incarceration.
Yes.
David Vitter brought it up.
Of all people, yes.
Yeah, during the talk about medical marijuana, and he said that we have these nonviolent offenders that we're warehousing. Isn't that the term he used? Yeah. And that was that's one of the conversations we haven't heard.
And it's that's a good issue. That's an interesting issue because it really is something where you have the right and the left coming together. The right partially for financial reasons, in addition to ethical moral reasons, but that's an issue where Rick Perry has taken the lead, for example, and where we might actually be able to get past some of this partisanship, I think.
Okay, well, both of you guys, you were at the debate.
Yes,
you were also
I was.
there yesterday. Okay, this was a WDSU. It was a statewide debate. It was aired statewide, was it not? I believe it was aired statewide.
Not at every market.
But all of the candidates, all the four majors were there for a televised debate, which is, from what I understand, kind of going to be an unusual, rare occurrence. So in case you missed it, it was on at 6 o'clock yesterday, which a lot of people probably missed it because they weren't home yet. It is online. You can go take a look at it. Judge the debate for me. Grade the debate. Who came out strongest?
There was definitely a debate after the debate.
About the debate.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks went down the social media hole and were very critical of WDSU and Scott Walker for the questions that they chose. And Scott Walker fired right back on social media saying that they did the best they could. But look, when you spend several minutes on medical marijuana and just a couple minutes on the budget, when we're looking at $1 billion plus shortfalls for the next 5 years, and then you spend time on this Kentucky clerk, she's from Kentucky, right? And then you don't ask any questions about health care.
You opened the debate with Kim Davis. It was open,
exactly.
Yeah, but that's a tough job organizing these debates.
It is. And to keep them under control.
I get it, but
and I don't
it would
know
have been
if
nice to hear something.
Before. We have other people in the market who are more seasoned at this.
So in the end, is there any reason to believe that it created any sort of shift in thinking to any place in the state?
I think it did for the folks who still have debates coming up. We have a debate almost every week, televised debate until the primary. And you just know the folks who are organizing these are sitting back and watching what happened. And Bob Mann, the columnist for the Picayune, called it journalistic malpractice. And that article has been circulated to every debate organizer for the rest of the cycle.
Now, we have to say David Vitter has not agreed to a lot of those debates.
He's agreed to the one in
Ruston, which is in 2 weeks, Louisiana Tech. Unclear what the TV arrangements will be, but
KTBS, Shreveport.
Okay, will be on New Orleans, Baton Rouge, that we need to figure out.
Yeah.
And this is all still pretty new, but that's part of the whole controversy here is that David Vitter's running this kind of front-runner strategy where he doesn't want to expose himself very much. That's very frustrating to his opponents who want to get on TV as much as possible and also want to get at him as much as possible. And judging by last night, maybe want to slip in a little reference to a certain scandal a number of years ago because Jay Darden did, Scott Angel did. Scott Angel had this line. He said, fornication. David Vitter is wrong on fornication, taxation, and education.
Education, right. Okay, so just quickly, who do you think came out the strongest out of yesterday's debate? Questions aside, the actual people who were debating.
I think maybe Scott Angel did, I'm going to say. I think he had some good lines, and he kind of popped. I think maybe some of what he said resonated.
What do you think, Errol?
I'm looking at John Bell and John Bell Edwards and David Vitter. I think Vitter finally got his hits in on John Bell Edwards for the first time probably this cycle in a real way.
Linking him to Obama.
Yeah, I think it looked like a two-candidate race last night.
Okay, 3 weeks to go before the primary. Not that many opportunities to perhaps see all four on stage at one time, but we do know in 2 weeks there will be another debate.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll get a chance to see it down here.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about now going to the U.S. House of Representatives and the GOP there, and they're going through some leadership change. Speaker Boehner has announced that he's stepping down, and so where does that leave our congressman who's currently the whip?
Right, so what's going to happen
Steve
is...
Scalise.
Right, on October 8th, I'm being told that there's going to be an election for Speaker. Congressman McCarthy, who is currently the majority leader, is going to run for that spot. If he wins, that will open up the majority leader spot. Steve Scalise has already said he's interested in that gig, that he would run for it. If he runs and loses, he would still be whip. Whip would not open up. However, there's some slight rumblings and a conversation going on about a rule change by where anyone who wants to run for those positions would have to give up their current positions. This came from outside the Freedom Caucus, which is really the ultra-conservative sect of the House, but they seem to like the idea. They also like the idea of holding off a few more weeks until things can settle a little bit more, but they don't have a majority to do either of those things right now. So it's going to be interesting. It'll be the first time since Hell Boggs that Louisiana has had someone in the majority leader position, and there's some interesting behind-the-scenes drama within the delegation too. You got Charles Bustani, who did not support Steve Scalise on the first ballot for whip last go around, and really took some heat for that. Well, when it became public that Steve Scalise was going to run, his team made sure to email reporters and say, "Hey, look, Congressman Bustani went and met with Steve Scalise and told him he would make a great majority leader." Well, now we got Congressman John Fleming, who was part of this Freedom Caucus, so that broke off from the Republican Study Committee that Scalise used to run, and the first vote that Scalise had to whip, he got crossways with Fleming on as an immigration vote, someone from his own delegation. Well, now Fleming has been completely quiet about who he's going to back for majority leader. He's part of the Freedom Caucus.
Although early on he made some noise about wanting to shake things up and say, maybe we need some new blood in here, so Scalise has to worry about that.
So Scalise does have opposition.
Oh, yes.
He does. He's Tom Price is running against him.
But let's just clarify the point that for all the talk about Scalise running for majority leader, that won't happen unless the majority leader is elected.
Right, unless McCarthy. And also I think it's important to remember that we were talking about Bustani and Fleming, and that these two men are both positioning themselves to run for the U.S. Senate next year. So is this a campaign issue? Is Fleming going to come home, the Tea Party rebel, saying he voted against the leadership, or is he going to be, kind of part of the team and help elect the first Louisiana majority leader since Hell Boggs?
And another piece of it that's interesting is Scalise, he was head of this Republican Study Committee, which is this very conservative caucus, not quite as conservative as the Freedom Caucus. And he was brought into the leadership to kind of be an emissary to that group and to smooth over relations. He had some successes. He had some real tough times when he was trying to put a coalition together. If he ends up being tossed aside because he's too establishment, that really tells you how far to the right this caucus has gone, this Republican caucus.
So October 8th is when the election for Speaker is set. Is it possible that everything will be taken care of on October 8th? Majority Leader and
I would believe so, but the way there's been talk about holding off, but I don't think there's the votes to do that. So it very could well happen all in one day. At least that seems to be the plan right now.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeremy. Okay, now back to an issue that really disturbs everyone. It's crime, and there have been incidents over the past few weeks of 2 restaurants, 1 bar being held up by 3 armed gunmen. In one case, it was 2 armed gunmen. People are just really outraged and are now thinking that perhaps they should only take maybe 1 credit card with them if they're going out to dinner and take off all their jewelry. What's happening here?
Fake purses.
Yeah.
I think I heard someone say it's it's not entirely new or unheard of. I was thinking about this back in January. Buffa's over on Esplanade. 2 guys walked in, robbed the bar. Back in May, you had a bar in Central City where I think it was 2 people or 3 people came in and robbed patrons and robbed the bar. So it's certainly not unheard of, but since August 20th, you've had 3 now. Patois on the 20th, and then Chafalaya on the 24th of this month, and now Monkey Hill. So there seems to be a sense of fear and frustration on the part of folks who live in those neighborhoods, police, city leaders. The city council just had a special meeting earlier today, called Chief Harrison in to talk about his plans to address these armed robberies and then just crime in general in the city.
The question is, what is the plan then? We did see that U.S. Attorney Ken Polite was standing at the podium side by side with the police chief. Why was he there?
Yeah, I think it was maybe the day of the Monkey Hill, or the day after the Monkey Hill robbery. They had a press conference, and Mayor Landrieu said that he had reached out to the U.S. Attorney about enlisting the help of federal authorities in this investigation. If they can link these 3 armed robberies, and they haven't been able to yet, but certainly you watch the surveillance footage and hear what witnesses and the victims have to say about it, and there are similarities, of course. If they can link them, then they can get these kind of federal conspiracy charges against those responsible, which carry hefty prison sentences if found guilty.
Federal or state, you would assume that there would be some pretty heavy charges.
Now you've got the FBI and the ATF and DA and all these federal agencies with all of their resources thrown into the mix to try to help solve these.
The federal government's got the equipment. I mean, they got a lot more toys to go after all these things.
Exactly. They have the tools in the toolbox and just the bodies to devote to this kind of investigation.
Yeah, to investigate. So, you're there reporting. You're there every day, talking to people in the police department, etc. Yeah. Is there any inkling that they have an idea who is doing this? That they're anywhere close to an arrest?
No, I think that there is certainly no public inkling, and I think something like this, they're going to play it pretty close. I think if they have an idea of who this is, they're going to want to keep it very quiet until they arrest those responsible, and then can link them. I think the big thing is not just arresting somebody, but trying to make sure that they've got, if it's the same people, that they've got a solid case.
Errol?
There was a horrible incident in Oregon yesterday, and when the president was responding, he said, we're getting desensitized to all this, and he again, brought up about guns, about the availability of guns. Where is people getting the guns?
So there's certainly a lot of there. If you follow kind of like the daily crime, you'll notice there are a lot of home break-ins and car break-ins, and I'm always amazed by the amount of guns that are taken in these various burglaries. That's certainly one avenue. Chief Harrison was talking about this kind of black market of gun sales, and particularly these extended mags that you find, and that's another avenue. So I think there's no shortage of places to find them.
Are we also seeing kids who are like 18 and 19 years, who like 10 years ago during Katrina were still little kids, and they have been sort of like rudderless during this period of time?
That's a possibility. If you watched any of, and I caught a bit of the special council meeting today, and I think several council members were asking the chief that kind of question, like why do we have this kind of rash of armed robberies? And it's not just these 3. There was like a 16-year-old, I want to say, who was picked up for these, they'd been calling them shotgun robberies. It turns out it wasn't a shotgun. And I think a lot of council members asked, why is it that we have these teenagers who are doing this? And the chief didn't really have much of an answer. I think there's a lot of theories out there. But at the end of the day, Chief Harrison always says it's a choice that people are making, and a rational choice, I think he referred to.
Out of the committee meeting that happened today, the Criminal Justice Committee meeting, Council, which was a special meeting called in lieu of these robberies, there was questions to the chief about what are you doing with this, and he wanted to assure the public that they do have a strategy they're working on it in terms. But I mean, there's a crime problem across the city. But he did say also, I thought it was interesting, he described the NOPD as the James Bond of police departments, and that was in terms of technology, because he said the NOPD has really been a front runner, a forerunner in body cameras, cameras in cars, et cetera, and other technology that they are employing.
Yeah, and they talked about even some more during the meeting today, the one that I think we talked about earlier, the gunshot detectors up on streetlights.
Streetlight,
I don't know if that's viable
they're
option or not. But
searching for a number of solutions, bringing more people in, helicopters, everything.
Yeah.
So the community just wants it solved. Certainly, that's for
yeah,
sure.
they're frustrated and they want to, they're fighting against kind of being reactionary towards these kinds of things. Certainly.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you. Over to Errol right now. We have some other races too, other than governor. There is lieutenant governor.
The interesting thing about the lieutenant governor's race is that all of the front runners were in effect parish presidents. You have John Young, who's parish president of Jefferson Parish, and Billy Nungesser, who's parish president of Plaquemines Parish. Kip Holden in Baton Rouge, they have what they call the mayor president. You're mayor of Baton Rouge and you're president of East Baton Rouge president. So they've all had executive experience, which is unusual to have that come. And what the polls have shown, and what everybody expected a year ago, you could have talked about this once you know the candidates, is that somebody's getting the runoff with Kip Holden. It's like the same thing with the Democrats with John Bell Edwards. Kip Holden's a Democrat, and the rest are Republicans, and so whoever gets in the runoff wins. And so it seems to be a battle between John Young and Billy Nungesser. You would think, on one hand, that Young has an advantage just because he's got Jefferson Parish. And I mean, Jefferson Parish is the place to be from if you want to have a career in Louisiana politics. It's part of the big New Orleans metro area. It's Republican. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of media markets. Billy Nungesser doesn't have quite that advantage, even though he's on the edge of the New Orleans media market. And from what I'm told, and I think, Jeremy, you've seen it, that he's really working hard around the state, that he's got a high profile, and so he doesn't suffer from less of effort. And so if you're trying to think of a lieutenant governor's race, you really think of it right now as a battle between Young and Nungesser to get into a runoff against Kip Holden. And you got some numbers?
And we have some poll numbers on that, actually. In the poll that The Advocate and WWL sponsored, Kip Holden is leading with 25%, John Young with 23%, Billy Nungesser with 20%. So they're right neck and neck. Again, it's interesting. Billy Nungesser has a much smaller parish, but he also, remember, was a very big figure in the BP spill. So he had he's run statewide before, for one thing, and he also got a lot of media exposure, including national, 5 years ago. So people do know his name. One number that's interesting in this is, again, they're both from this media market. John Young has made some inroads in North Louisiana. He is actually leading North Louisiana, according to this poll. So he travels
ads
well.
He's running?
I think ads. I know he's been traveling the state.
Mm-hmm.
I think he makes a good first impression. I think people seem to be responding to him. Mm-hmm. He seems very professional. He has a bit of a contrast in style with Nungesser. He's more cool.
He's been on TV nonstop since late August. He just had a new ad up, new radio ads going on.
And he's raised a lot of money. He's done very well.
Boat traveling through his logo.
Yes.
That's something that's really pretty cool. And
then Albert Guillory, the other Republican, is trailing far behind. We should add.
This is a pattern in different forms that you've seen in statewide politics, where there was always this candidate, well, not always, but quite often, the more liberal candidate, and that candidate had a ticket into a runoff. It used to be like the mayor of New Orleans. If a mayor of New Orleans would run for office, the mayor of New Orleans would get into a runoff and lose the runoff because everybody else would coalesce against him. In this case, it's Kip Holden, who's Democrat and who's black. In this case, being black is a disadvantage. When he ran for mayor of Baton Rouge, it was an advantage, and so it works in different ways. But so you're seeing the same sort of pattern with the Republicans kind of circling around and wanting to get into a runoff. The thing about the lieutenant governor's office is that, some states don't even have a lieutenant governor. They just wiped it out because all you do is just kind of wait and see how the governor's feeling each morning. But in Louisiana, we attach the responsibility of being in charge of tourism. And it's a busy thing. And the kind of people who run for lieutenant governor, I mean, they're good people, but they're not always necessarily experts on tourism. I mean, that's not their...
Rich Landry, Jay Darden,
I think that's the selling point. But
well, before we run out of time, though, I want to get to Attorney General. So you have another final point on Lieutenant Governor, or can we move over to Jeremy Hamilton?
Move on.
Let us move on. Okay. Before we run out of time, Attorney General, we have a couple of minutes now to talk about that.
Two leading candidates. One is the incumbent, Buddy Caldwell, a former Democrat who became a Republican last time in order to head off a Republican challenge, is being challenged by Jeff Landry, a former Tea Party congressman, very, very conservative. Interesting thing, Buddy Caldwell, the incumbent Republican Attorney General, the entire Republican establishment has fallen in behind Jeff Landry. And there isn't a really well-known Democrat. There's Jerry Broussard-Baloney from the River Parishes, but...
We have the names up there, and you saw...
Right, but not, she's not necessarily someone who's reached the top tier, so it's probably going to be between these two. which means maybe Buddy Caldwell kind of returns to his Democratic roots and tries to pick up that part of the vote and peel off some Republicans. Yeah.
A likely runoff in there also?
Well, I'm not sure that strategy is going to work. Once the Democratic candidates go up on radio, and they will, and start bashing Caldwell, I think he probably loses some of his African American support.
He's really angered everybody on both the left and the right.
I think this race is going to tighten up and end up maybe even being a three-way battle for the runoff.
You know, we were talking about the spots that are running now, the ads that are running now, particularly, I mean, a lot of them certainly in the governor's race. It's almost getting confusing. You're not sure what ad is about whom or attacking whom.
Well, it's interesting because some of them are from the candidates and some are from the super PACs too, but the super PACs are very closely aligned with the candidates, even though they're supposed to be independent, uncoordinated is the word, but don't pop that for a minute. I should add quickly the poll numbers. We had Buddy Caldwell at 30 and Jeff Landry at 20.
Okay. All right, 3 more weeks, more polls, more forums, at least one debate with all of the major governor candidates, and a lot more political ads. That we can be sure of. Okay. All righty. Thanks. Time to look ahead now.
Sunday night when the Saints play the Cowboys, despite the miserable record that the Saints have had, good possibility the game's going to have huge ratings because they're playing the Cowboys, that the Cowboys have always been the top ratings drawing team in the NFL, which is why the networks love to show the Cowboys on nighttime football, especially on the road where they got the national media market, but they also got that huge Dallas media market. So if the Saints win, and I think, by the way, I think they will, it might be a chance to prove that they're back before a big national audience.
We like Errol's prediction, and Drew Brees is supposed to be back. Okay, Jeremy.
Next up for the debate schedule is WVLA in Baton Rouge. The station has also commissioned its own poll, and those results will be coming out over the next 2 weeks.
And that's for the governor's debate,
governor's
right?
race.
Okay. Jonathan.
Officer Juan Barnes over at NOPD reminded me to tell everyone that next Tuesday, National Night Out Against Crime, the kickoff party is over at St. Rock Park.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie?
Okay, we have one last piece of this poll coming out over the weekend. It's about the Confederate monuments, statewide opinion towards that controversy, so stay tuned.
Also, you all polled about who was the favorite governor.
Most popular, Edwin Edwards. Least popular, Bobby Jindal.
Okay. All right, folks. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And, of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.